Chapter 1 continued. I thought a lot today about what was in Chapter 1, and this is kind of where my consternation has been, is I want to share chronological things, but there were also this story of kind of what happened to me, and I want that to be part of it too. That's the part I'm most afraid about, because one of my sisters is a subscriber, and although she knows all of it, she too had damage. But anyway, so what I wanted to start on before we get into Puerto Rico was our relationship, excuse me, with Grandma and Grandpa S, who was my adoptive father's parents. And then we'll call grandfather and grandmother K, who are my moms. And Grandma and Grandpa S adored us. You know, I was the first grandchild. My first sister was her second one 3 months later, and then the other two. And during the divorce, they were there, and we were so loved. And for that, I want to say that my very beginning was good. California was good to me, other than my parents' marriage falling apart and my dad, committing adultery with a babysitter, and my mom being, upset and all. My family falling apart. My grandparents were very good about stepping in and taking care of us kids. Well, my mom needed him to, and California was awesome. My grandpa had all kinds of fruit trees in his yard. My grandma had roses that were bigger than my hand, and they lined the front of the house. And she'd open the windows, and it was dizzying with the smell of roses. And ever since then, I've just had such a fondness and a love for roses and the smell of roses. My grandpa had a plum tree. I'm sure he had an apple tree, orange tree. I don't know what. I do know that me and sister one time, her and I crawled up in that plum tree, and they're like, "Okay, girls, you need to get down. You got to quit eating the plums." And we're like, "No, we're not coming down," And we just ate plums. They're like, "You're going to be sick. You're going to be sick." And we're like, "We don't care." And so we did eat ourselves sick, but we very much enjoyed it. My grandpa had a 24-foot cabin cruiser boat, and there's a big lake system next to where they lived, and not in San Francisco, northeast of there. And every weekend it was on the lake, on the boat. And me and sister one learned how to swim. Of course, I was, 3 months older than her. So she was 18 months old. So I've been 19, 20, 21. I would have been 21 months old when we were swimming in the length of a pool underwater. So we were taught to swim very early, and we're little fishes. And with going to the lake all the time with my grandpa and grandma, we definitely had a lot of, swimming time, lake time. And there's this one story of, there's little islands in the lake, and, some you can get on, some are just trees or whatever. And we had pulled up, and we're going to have a picnic on this one island. And there was an island not far away. I mean, I'm not good at measurements, but, I don't know, maybe a couple 100 yards away. And I wanted to swim to that island. And so they're setting up and getting lunch going, and they look up, and I'm halfway out to the next island. And they come and they get me, and, "Oh yeah, I'll be good. I won't do that again. Like, that's too much for you to swim." And so they get busy again, and here I'd go for the next island, and they'd have to come get me again and bring me back. And after the third time, my grandpa took a long piece of rope, tied one into a tree and the other end my waist. And he gave me about 3 feet into the water. So I wasn't going to quit trying to swim to that island. So he just tied me to a tree. there were wonderful, joyful memories along with, our family falling apart. So it was a very textured kind of bringing up. It was mostly love. When we moved to Utah, we had to go stay with my dad. I don't know if it was a couple weeks. I'm not sure the duration of it. However long it was too long for my stepmother. And she, popped out a second kid and was working on the third one, and they had an apartment. So we had to go stay with them in their apartment. And she just had nothing but disdain for us kids. And I remember she was, and I don't know, I'm kind of thinking that she was playing us, but she was talking about maybe trying to adopt my little sister number 2 and my little brother because they had blonde hair and she had bleach blonde hair, and she thought she'd get herself a couple extra blondies. Well, when we go back to my mom, we tell her what they'd said, and that was the last time my sister number 2 and my little brother ever went to them. They never went there again. Of course, me and sister number 1 had to go again the next summer, spend time, and we got to see our grandma S and grandpa S, and which was the best part of it because, my stepmom it was like mud on your shoe. That's what we were. We were interlopers in mud on our shoe and didn't want to bother with us. And I remember one time, and these are the kind of things that I do want to put in my story because it just illustrates kind of the fracturing of me. And I remember her taking me and sister number 1 over to our grandma and grandpa's, and they were going to leave us there for the day. And the reason they were doing that is because they were going to go to Knott's Berry Farm so they could have a family day. You see? And we didn't get to go to Knott's Berry Farm. We'd been there before and all that, but I was maybe 6 or 7 years old. I didn't understand that. I didn't understand why they had a family and we were not part of it and all this stuff. And my grandmother was so upset by it. She was madder than a hornet anyway. So I kind of wanted to fill it in with that kind of stuff, that, in fact, I did have a wicked stepmother and, a person who stole and tore up our family to boot. So anyway, we do move to Puerto Rico. And like I said, we got there and there's monkeys swinging from the trees and everything. And my dad had rented this apartment up in Buena Vista, which is this hill area outside of Mayagüez. In our apartment, we had a balcony, of course, and it was our kind of 2 parts of a house, actually. The downstairs was an apartment, and the upstairs was us. And anyway, you could go out on the front patio, and you could see the ocean. You could see down the mountain and see the ocean, and you could smell the ocean breeze, and it was beautiful, and the palm trees swaying, and we were in such a different world. I mean, different flora and fauna. It was a completely different world, and it wasn't America. Everybody's speaking Spanish, and I remember they sent us to a American school. At first, it was a ways away, and it had kindergarten all the way up through a senior in college. So it was like this huge campus. The college was on one side, and then, the school 0 through 12 was on the other side. And so it was big, and it was all English speaking and kids. I mean, I had Spanish classes there, but the hippie movement still was in full swing, and there were girls that would come to school with T-shirts on and underwear. And because it was all in one school, these teenagers would, hoist the kids up on their shoulders, and it was kind of cool that way. I I wasn't sick anymore. Now I've got a new dad, and that seemed to solve everything as far as my health. I did kind of gain a very strong authority issue, because I knew what happened with my dad and that, and then seeing my mom basically fall apart in Utah and having to kind of take an adult role at, you know, 7, 8 years old, 6 and 7 years, whatever, years old. I turned 8 before we moved, so very young to be assuming an adult role and to be my mom's kind of sounding board or support or whatever. But anyway, I lost respect for adults, and I've always said my whole life I never want to grow up and be an adult because I just have no respect for adults, and I have a problem with authority, and that made it hard in school. I remember in that school, the American one, being hit with books. I remember my teacher had these really super long fingernails. They weren't squared at the top, they were pointy. And she would come by and just dig them into my shoulder here on the top. And get home and change clothes, and my mom would see them. She's like, what is that? And I told her about my teacher digging her claws into me and hitting me with books. And so they pulled us out of there. That was not going to work. And there was a school up on the mountain where, close to us, although it was a Seventh-day Adventist school. But they did speak English, and so that's where they transferred us to this American school. Excuse me, I'll get a little something. Anyway, I'm sorry about that. So we're at this Seventh-day Adventist school. Of course, it's a different religion than we are, and they, we just kind of learn what they can't, mostly what they can't do, which is a bit. But, I made some good friends, and, the school was okay. It was okay. There was a time I had a really good teacher in 4th grade, Mrs. Adams, and she was very sweet, nice lady, older lady. And then the next year, 5th grade, had this other teacher. She was young, and she was a mess. She would sit there during class and noxema her legs, and she had attitude. And I remember one of the classes was teaching us about the origins of their religion and how this woman went to bed and she had a vision and an angel spoke to her, and she wrote this book and their religion's based on it or something like that. I don't remember, but I was like, wait, whoa. I don't know how many years old now. And I was like, wait, no. That was Joseph Smith. And he was a boy, and the angel Moroni came, and that wasn't a girl. That was a boy. And I held my ground and got locked in the closet, media room, but it was a closet because it's shut from both sides. The mimeograph machine was in there. So I get locked in there all the time. And the one good thing about it, other than being locked in a closet, was it had a window that looked over the tennis court. So thank goodness it had the window. But we then moved down to Saltina, which was a subdivision outside of Mayaguez a bit. And it was a nice home, and our neighbor kids were great, and we would run the jungles with the kids, and actually we ran the jungles, and we lived up in Buena Vista, and it was amazing. We had just so much freedom, and we would go, and it was the most wonderful thing to have these jungles. And we actually, next to our apartment building, there was it was not even an acre, but it was pure jungle. And to get in there and get out was kind of a thing. It was, you can't just walk through a jungle like you can the woods. It's, you got to kind of get your way and dig your way through it. Big old spiders in there and stuff. But we I'll go back to the mountain. We're living on the mountain, going to this school, and okay, there was unrest at that time in Puerto Rico. I don't know what's going on in America, but there was talk of Puerto Rico becoming a commonwealth. And the people were split. One of them saw the advantages of becoming a commonwealth of the United States, as far as benefits and all of that kind of stuff. And at the same time, they wanted, other people wanted to keep their heritage, their identity, all of this, and not, be kind of gobbled up by the United States. So because of that, there was political unrest, and there were bomb scares and all of this. I mean, you mix in the hippie stuff, and so it was quite a thing because the hippies went down there and inserted themselves in things. And I remember one day we were going to have a field trip, and behind us, the property right behind us is this huge hospital. And we would go play at that hospital all the time. And they would give us kids like little pudding cups, and we would go visit some people in the hospital and chat with them. It was a cool thing. But they took all of us kids from the Seventh-day Adventist school, and they had us sit on the lawn behind the hospital. And they were having a bombing drill at the university on the bottom of the mountain. And so I don't know why they did this to us kids, but they had us sitting there watching this whole thing play out. And you've got ambulances, the sirens just were never ending, and they're pulling in, and there's these college kids, and they're laying on stretchers, and they got them all covered with ketchup, and they're just screaming and crying, and, mommy, and it was a horrific sight. Because these kids went for broke, I don't even know if they knew we were watching, but it was terrible, and it just never ended. And then, as all the commotions go on, then they're starting to bring some of the stretchers back out. Then they put a balloon, like for a head, and they just covered it with a white sheet. So we all interpret this as dead kids. It was one of the most horrific things I saw as a child. It was terrible. I don't know why they thought that would help us in any way. Also, when we moved to Puerto Rico, to Mayagüez, our church was just getting going in Puerto Rico. And if there was much going on, it was in San Juan. Well, we're on the other side of the island. There's 1, 2, maybe 3, other than us, families. And so they wrote to Salt Lake and asked, we were going to a non-denominational at the Air Force Base there for church, because that's all there was. Well, our families wrote to Salt Lake and said, can we start a branch here? And they're like, yes. And they started sending missionaries into the area and all of this. And so we started from nothing in someone's house, and then they rented like the back part of a YMCA. And so it was very basic beginning of our church in that area. Now they have several stakes there, and they actually have a temple in San Juan. So we were kind of the beginning level of our church there in Mayagüez, Puerto Rico, which was really cool. And the missionaries wouldn't stay long. There is, it's called Santeria, but it's kind of tied in with devil worship there, witchcraft, that whole kind of thing. Not voodoo or, whatever that thing is in Jamaica, but it was different, and it was wicked. And these poor kids that come from come from Utah, boys, green behind the ears, and it would just scare them. Like what they were coming up against was terrifying. And they talked to us about some of the things they'd run into, and it was like, oh my gosh, And so heaven and hell was happening in Mayagüez, and we witnessed some stuff as well. And I guess that was the first time I was ever really introduced to raw evil, and it was something else. And the island overall, I'm sensitive spiritually and in other ways, and I just felt the kind of the wickedness of it. Like it was just like it it hung in the air like a humidity, this kind of wickedness. And, I felt unease, not at ease there, other than running and doing that stuff. There still was this kind of, I don't know, heaviness in the spiritual atmosphere. So that was something. But there was a lot of time spent at the beach. I'm a water baby, and the beach was amazing, and we spent a lot of time there, a lot of time. Tried to do a surfboard, couldn't stay up. I have no upper body anything. But surfboard's a lot of lower body, but I just couldn't balance myself on there. I did see a stingray in the water, kind of flying away. Sister number one stepped on a sea urchin, and my mom got bit in the toe by a crab, and I think that was our interactions with sea creatures. But it was amazing. And then, as again I said, that, we were running the jungles. So it was a wonderful thing. While we lived in Puerto Rico, me and sister number one had to go to my dad's because he has his right to have us out there. And I think we did stay for a month those times because we flew all the way from Puerto Rico to California. So because it was such a big trip, we went for the whole month. And he and his adulterous wife were living in Tahoe, Lake Tahoe then. My dad was a contractor. So they were building a bunch of houses up there. And so that's why they were in Lake Tahoe. They were on the California side. And I remember me and sister number one got on the plane in San Juan. Parents put us on the plane. And we flew from San Juan to maybe Miami and then up to Chicago, where we switched planes and then flew from there to San Francisco. And it was me and Stacy alone. And golly, I think it would have to be 72, maybe 1971, 72. I remember we had a layover. Of course, you don't talk to strangers. You don't do nothing. Don't go to no one. And we got into Chicago, and we came out of the gateway thing, and we'd been flying Delta, and there was a huge African-American man. Okay, I have no race issues. I mean, I just came from an island where, a good part of the population's black, or Puerto Rican. So, or, that's kind of mixed in because African also went to Puerto Rico. So I black meant nothing to me. Black was the same as white, the same as everything else. But this man was huge. Of course, I was a little pipsqueak anyway. But he was wanting us to go with him. And I just heard my mom in my head. And I said, no, we're not going with you. Okay? And, I'm a little pipsqueak. And he says, well, I'm from the airline. I'm here to take you to our office. We'll get you soda, get you some chips or some candy till the next plane. I said, no, my mom said we're not to go with anyone, and we're not. And sister number one's about ready to follow him off, and I pull her back. I'm like, no, we're not going. And I dug in, and that poor man was humbled by my little butt standing there, ain't gonna go. Finally, they had to call security, and security came over, verified that this guy did work for Delta, showed an ID, and basically escorted all of us to the Delta offices. So I am nothing if I am not obedient. But and of course we got the promised sodas and cookies or whatever they gave us, and put us on the next plane, and we made it out to San Francisco all on our own, and so that was interesting. And we got up to Tahoe. My dad actually with a friend came down to pick us up. They had a pickup truck. And on the way up to Lake Tahoe, we're up in the mountains, and he pulls off down some dirt road and walks us out to the middle of a mountain. It's on like this top of the mountain bit, and it's ringed by trees, and he says, we're camping here. And he collected some wood, and they started a fire and had sleeping bags for all of us, and we slept under the sky on the top of a mountain. And it was one of my most cherished experiences. It was cold, but it was still summer, but it just under the stars on the top of a mountain. And we're just there. I mean, it was just the most amazing thing in the world. And my dad was all about hunting, or not hunting, fishing, camping, all that kind of stuff. And he definitely made sure us girls knew that stuff. So then we ended up in Tahoe, and we got to their home there in Tahoe, and, got all in, and there's all this ruckus, and there's all these little kind of houses next door, little tiny cabiny houses. All this ruckus going on, and so us kids run over there, and one of the hippie girls is having a baby in her bed in the cabin, and we're so excited. We run back and we tell them, and they're like, "Kid, don't go back there, blah, blah, blah. We want to see the baby," and all this, and so my stepmother actually ended up going over there and helping her give birth or whatever. We did get to go see the baby after that, but lots of hippies in Lake Tahoe. And, I mean, my whole first part of my little bit of life was hippie, 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 hippie. And I believed what they believed in. I believed that everybody was beautiful. And I believe in, I don't want to say not having possessions, but in not having such a tie to possessions, items. I believe everyone's beautiful and who they are and what they are. And, we have the right to speak for ourselves, and just a lot of these hippie type ethos I was surrounded by, and basically are some of my core beliefs. So, but we were in Lake Tahoe, and my stepmother did not want to deal with us. She never did. So she sent us to day camp, so she didn't have to deal with us. So we went to day camp in Lake Tahoe, and it didn't get any better than that. I mean, you can feel bad about, like, ship me out, she don't want me. Okay, I mean, I'm in Lake Tahoe. Ship me out. And so we went to this day camp. We were there all day long. They taught us how to orienteer, how to, like arts, and, what to do if there's bears, swimming, hiking, all of this great stuff. And at the last night of the camp, which I think it was a week or two, but the last night of the camp, they had this Shakespeare Under the Pines, and they still have it. And so we would go as kids, and we would watch Midsummer Night's Dream. I don't know what the second one was, because I don't know how many we went to. I don't know if we went there 2 or 3 times, but as we aged up to the top age, we actually snuck a canoe with some other kids, and we rowed it over to this other area, like on the shore, and hung out there. And they had like an outdoor movie and concessions, so we hung out there and partied. Not party, but hung out there with a bunch of kids. And then we, canoed back to our camp, and we got in trouble. How do you know how dangerous that is? You're out there on that lake at night and blah, blah, blah. Lake Tahoe, you can be anywhere in that lake and look down and you will see the bottom. It is the cleanest, clearest, most beautiful, cold lake in the world. It's absolutely heaven. But yeah, so there's Shakespeare Under the Pines. I think I would appreciate it infinitely more today than I did then, but it was still pretty cool. And then, so we were in Puerto Rico. I don't have the years laid out, but let's see, I was 8 in 1970. So in 1972, I would have been 10. I think that's when we left Puerto Rico. And there's a whole lot more to tell with that one. I'll finish up with this one as far as our family. My dad's daughters, 3 daughters, came to Puerto Rico and spent a week or something. So we all got to meet each other and go to the beach and stuff like that. So we had 3 new sisters. I know the second time we came to the United States, to go to my dad's. The whole family went, and they went out to Colorado. My mom had never been out there, and so my mom and my sister number two and my brother went to Colorado to the ranch. My dad's family had a huge ranch in eastern Colorado. So they went out to the ranch. Everybody got to meet everybody. They did stuff. I don't know. Went to Pikes Peak or something like that. I don't know what they did. But so they all got to meet my sister and brother and my mom then. We were back in Lake Tahoe. So that will kind of wind up my story. Try to think if there's any, I mean, Puerto Rico is still really a good place to be other than the things I've talked about. Nothing traumatic happened with abuse or anything. Life was pretty good then, other than being on this demonic island. It wasn't that bad. But anyway, the next chapter will deal with coming back to America. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. Love you. Bye.